restart. So I had this dream back in 2007, late 2007, almost 2008. And I was praying and fasting for a situation. I was trying to figure out what the outcome was. I was asking the Lord about the future. Um, I should have been a little bit more specific, but I was asking to know the future, because if you know the future and the outcome, you cannot be defeated. So I was really praying and really seeking the Lord. I dropped down to like 180 pounds. I mean, I was just really fasting and praying, and I had this dream. And in this dream, I'm walking in this field, and it looked like fall. All the leaves are brown. Everything looks like it was dying and stuff. And I was walking and walking, and all of a sudden, I walked into this like small little city. 10-story buildings, few skyscrapers and stuff, and I'm walking down this road, and there was just trash everywhere, garbage everywhere. The windows were boarded up. There was graffiti everywhere. So I kept walking, and all of a sudden, a group of people started following along behind me, and all of a sudden, they started chasing me. So I took off running, and I started running, and I darted down an alley, and I hopped onto a dumpster, and I climbed up on the roof, the roof was a little lower to where I could reach it, and I climbed up on the roof. And then once I got on the roof, I turned around and see who was actually chasing me, and to get a good look at them. And so I seen that they were just average people. Their clothes were torn. They were carrying bats with nails in them. Some people had some knives and machetes and boards. And all of a sudden they started fighting amongst each other. And then all of a sudden one broke out from the group and started running, and then they started chasing that person down. So I didn't wait for anything, so I hurried up and jumped down on the dumpster, jumped down, and then I was always told, if you're lost, try and walk in a straight line. So I backtracked where I was at and started proceeding forward down this road, and I noticed that there was a tent where a building should have been, and it looked like a real small tent, but I noticed that there were two guards standing outside the tent, which I thought was kind of odd. So I walked into the tent to kind of get an observation of where I was at, trying to get my bearings and stuff. So I walked into the tent, and the tent kind of actually opened up, and it looked like a very small convenience store. It had aisles and shelves and rows of food, but there was no food or nothing. So I started walking around, and I know that those two guards by the cash register and a cashier. So they were all really staring at me really hard, but there was nothing on the shelf. So I started walking around, going down the aisles and stuff, and then I spotted what seemed to be a real small Reese's Pieces peanut butter cup, the kind you hand out for Halloween or trick or treat or something, the real small kind. So I grabbed that, and I walked up to the cash register, and I put it down, and he says, that'll be $5.10. And I started thinking, $5.10, that's a lot. So I reached in my pocket, and sure enough, I had $5, but I didn't have the 10 cents. So I laid the $5 down on the counter, and he grabbed it, and he says, we're not going to give the government their tax. And so I was trying to make conversation. I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, there is no government. And he kind of got kind of snippy with me, and all of a sudden everybody seemed to turn their attention towards me. And so I'm getting a little nervous because I'm being highlighted for something. And he says, don't you understand there's no government? Where you been? And so I'm trying to think real quick, and I was like, well, I got hit in the head. And so everybody kept saying I lost my memory a little bit. So I forgot. And he goes, okay. And so I hurried up, grabbed my candy bar, Reese's peanut butter cup, and I walked out. And so to try to keep in a straight line. So when I left the tent, I proceeded forward to keep on that straight line to figure out where I was at. And I walked a little further, and I noticed that there was a small little building, and there was a huge long line of people, and they were trying to getting into this building and stuff. And there, once again, they had armed guards and stuff. And so I walked by a little slower to do some observation of the people. Their clothes were torn. They looked like they were homeless. There were tan lines in their skin where they were wearing their clothes for a long period of time. Some of them people had sores, and I was thinking if I could only take showers or use soap or something, you know, better hygiene or something. But these people looked really raggedy and stuff, and I was trying to figure out what the deal was. And then all of a sudden, I heard this voice over the PA system saying, "We just ate Johnson. You all know that. We'll have another drawing shortly." And so I was like, did I hear that right? And so I started slowing down, but at the same time, I started speeding up to kind of get out of there. And then as I walked by, I seen these people just kind of look staring, and I was like, did I really hear that? And then she said it again. She said, "We just ate Johnson. You all know that. So we're going to have a drawing here in a little bit. Please be patient." So then I'm thinking, oh crap. So then I started walking a little further, and I seen there was a pit. And then there was people standing around this pit. And then all of a sudden I heard a bunch of dogs barking and stuff. And so I kind of walked slow to see what was going on. And I could still see this, I want to say a restaurant or something, but some place where these people were trying to go in. And so I looked down into this pit, and they had dogs. They were like dogs fighting. And then all of a sudden, this guy just jumped down into the pit, and he let these dogs just tear him apart. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out what the deal was. And this guy says there's 3 reasons why they did it: out of desperation, out of desperation, and the second one was I can't remember what the other 2 were. It's been a while since I've had the dream. So I was trying to figure out what this guy was trying to say, and so I started moving a little further away from this place and all this chaos and stuff. And so I started walking, and I started walking out of this town, and I started walking, and it just seemed like I was walking forever. I seen all these fields and stuff. The roads were pretty much desolate. There was nobody on the road or nothing. All the rivers were pretty much dried up, the streams and stuff. The trees still looked the same, no matter how much distance I seemed to carry or to go over. The leaves still looked brown, but it wasn't fall like the leaves were actually falling on the ground. So even the grass was brown. It was like a drought or something. And so I kept walking, and so I came across this small little town. It's almost like a western. It was a real small town, USA. And I started walking upon it, and then I seen like shotgun shells, bullet casings on the ground and stuff. It was like people had brass and stuff. It looked like there was a huge shooting and stuff. And so I seen people laying down. I seen cars turned over, a lot of cars filled with bullet holes and stuff. And so I started walking, and all of a sudden I heard these people hollering and screaming something, and they were carrying machetes and stuff. And then all of a sudden I stopped, and I went to turn, and this person appeared out of nowhere. It was a military person, and almost like a general. He's dressed in military. I don't know if he was Navy or Marines or anything. I couldn't tell the difference between the uniforms. And he said that this is ethnic cleansing. And I said, what is that? And he says this is where they're going around and they're doing ethnic cleansing. I need to be really careful what I say, so I don't get this deleted, but he basically told me what an ethnic cleansing was. And I said, I know I've been walking forever, but I didn't know I walked clear over to the Middle East. And he says, no, you're not in the Middle East, you're in the United States. And I said, how is this possible? And he said, they'll become a Muslim president, and he's going to pass laws to benefit the Muslims. And I said, so you're telling me that the cops are nothing, nobody can do anything about this? And he says, no. And so all the while I'm having a conversation with this person, the group started getting closer and closer, and they were yelling and screaming something I couldn't understand. So he handed me this gun, and it looked like a Bushmaster. I'm not really good with guns and stuff, but the bullet was a lot bigger than a 308, but it was smaller than a 50 caliber, and the casing was clear, and the gun wasn't heavy per se, but it was it looked like a miniature 308, like an M15, but a lot bigger bullet than a 308. So he handed me this gun, and so the magazine was clear plastic and everything. Everything was lightweight. It looked futuristic, and he said, "Here, you need this." And so I had the gun, and I shot into the crowd. Whether it was accident or if I was actually doing it on purpose, I don't know. But all of a sudden, someone grabbed their chest, and then they fell over, and then the people stopped, and then they took off into in the direction where they were coming from. And then when I looked around for that person, and he was totally gone. But then I noticed as I was walking out of town, I'm trying to get out of there as quickly as I possibly can, carrying this rifle on my shoulder. I seen a Jeep turned over. I had a machine gun mounted on it, and I seen bullet casings and everything. It was almost like there was a war. And so I started walking out of town in a straight line that I was going, trying to keep the straight line. And then I kept walking, seemed like forever, walking past these fields and valleys and stuff. And I came across this hill, and I seen this man sitting on this hill. And so I started walking towards the man. It was just veering off my trail a little bit. But I started walking up, and I got over the hill, and I was able to see what he was looking at. And it was actually a city. I want to say like 20-story buildings. I mean, it looked like a pretty nice building. What I could see, all the buildings were pretty much maintained, and the lights were on and stuff. But I noticed that there was concrete barriers around the building. There was no fence. There was no barbed wire. You can actually walk around the concrete barriers. It was a type of concrete barriers that they used along the highways and stuff to separate the cars and stuff. So they weren't very high, and you can actually walk in between them. So there was a distance between them and stuff. And so as I was walking up to the man, he said, "You don't want to go in there." And so I said, "Why not?" It seemed like they have water, electricity. It seemed like they have a lot of resources and stuff. And he says, they say they do, but they don't. And I said, well, why are those people in there? And he says, those people are citizens. I said, citizens? He goes, yes, they are citizens. They are citizens. And he said it 3 times. And so as I turned to look at the city, the man disappeared. And so I started walking towards the city to get a little better look. And as I got closer to the buildings, I was able to look in the windows, and I seen people's faces in the windows, and they had desperation on their faces. And a couple of them were shaking their head like, no, you don't want to come in here. So I stood there for a little bit, and then I decided to walk around the city and to stay away from it. So as I started walking away from the city, that's when I woke up. And so I wrote all this down, and I had this burning desire to tell my pastor, a couple people at church and stuff. And they told me I needed deliverance. They told me that I had something wrong with me and I needed to go through deliverance. And I believed them. I thought, this is, there's something wrong with me. So I went through deliverance classes, where people kind of stand around, they holler and scream at you for a couple hours and stuff. Then I went through Theophostic's, I went through Sozo and Theophostic healing and stuff like that. But nothing seemed to help, and I just had this burning desire to tell this dream. And then finally, after some time, one of the pastors that was in charge of prophetic actually came up to me and he pulled me off the side and he says, "Can you tell me your dream?" So I told him my dream, and he says, "Man, that's kind of interesting. Can you write it down for me? Maybe send it to me." So I sat down and I typed it on the computer and I emailed it to him. So I have proof that I emailed it to him. And he came back, I think, the following Sunday and stuff, and he says, "You really need to tell people about this dream." He says, "I felt the anointing all over it, and the Lord spoke to me and told me, yeah, this is real and this will happen, but we need to pray." So I've been trying to tell everybody I can. I've been trying to post it on YouTube and Facebook, but it keeps getting taken down. So now I'm going to put it on TikTok, and so hopefully that won't be taken down and stuff. So as the years have passed, I've analyzed the dream, and the first part of the dream, I recognized when the president of China came into San Francisco, and it was on the news, and they were filming San Francisco. That image that came through the television was the same image I seen in my dream. So that was confirmation of the streets in San Francisco and stuff. And then later I did some research and I Googled it, and there is a restaurant that does serve human flesh, and it is in California. It started up in 2016. So that part of the dream has come to pass. And then later I heard a couple of celebrities that were doing dog fights and stuff, and it actually, they were actually doing a lot more than dog fights and stuff. So that part of the dream has come to pass. Coming into this small town, that has not come to pass yet. But what I'm seeing on TV and the fact that what's going on in Michigan and Minnesota, I think that is being birthed to where it may come to pass. I'm praying that it will not. I'm hoping that since the Lord didn't say it and it was posted in a dream, that we can pray, and maybe enough prayer can divert a tragedy or a train wreck from happening. And then the other part, the last part, with cities, with the news and all the reporters and all the information that's on the internet and the TV, I think those are smart cities. I think they're trying to push the narrative of a smart city or some kind of a city, and I think the Lord is trying to warn his people that that's not a smart decision to be in, or even to go down in, to be a part of the smart city. So I think it's a warning. So we need to pray that those cities, the plans of the enemy are not carried out, that the Lord frustrates the hands of the enemy so they can't carry out their plans. So that's my dream. Hopefully that helps you.